School principals around Australia are responsible for about 4.5 million staff and students in almost 10,000 schools. The Australian Principal Occupational Health, Safety and Wellbeing Survey commenced in 2011 and is the longest running survey of its type. It's led by Dr. Paul Kidson. One principal from Paul's survey said, "I do love what I do. However, it's a seriously difficult role and it's only getting harder." Generalized anxiety and depression reports have increased from last year's survey. Severe anxiety was reported by 14.8% of participants, up from 11.4% in 2023. Moderate depression is reported by 11.1% of participants. 57% are subjected to gossip and slander, 35% are subjected to cyberbullying, and nearly 55% reported that they have been subjected to threats of violence. My name is Michael Murphy, and this is episode 5 of Vacilando, a Purpose Topography Project podcast. In Spanish, there is a word which I can't find a counterword to in English. It's the verb vascular, present participle vacilando. It doesn't mean vacillating at all. If one is vacilando, he is going somewhere, but he doesn't greatly care whether or not he gets there, although he has direction. John Steinbeck travels with Charlie in search of America, a quote from which the name of this podcast was derived. Vacilando isn't on a quest to solve the problems that are clearly present in principalship. We aren't really doing this to focus on these proportions or on these statistics. It's actually not really about the 2,200 people who undertook the Principal Wellbeing Survey. It's really about 3, and your relationship with them. The 3 who we meet, and the 3 who we get to spend the year with, and the 3 who I've had the pleasure of reflecting on in Term 1. And here's what I've taken away from Term 1 on Vacilando. Things aren't looking good.
Last year, in our research, we sliced and diced the data by career stages.
Mhm.
And early careers being 0 to 5, 5 to 10, et cetera, et cetera. And what we saw on just about every measure was adverse outcomes for the 0 to 5 leaders.
Paul Kidson, who we met in episode 1, shared with us a deep clarity on the isolation and the lack of support the principals are feeling. And yet, it was clear from meeting our principals that a lack of support is not universal. However, I do think there were elements of isolation that continued to come through, despite the rich relationships that our principals communicated to us. Principals carry the privilege of shaping lives, but they also shoulder a heavy burden, and that's one that they shoulder alone in their role. What I noticed when speaking to our principals is that even though they clearly had a very strong sense of what was deeply important to them and their community today, they were also looking maybe over their shoulder to the past and the way in which it was forming their present and future.
For me, regardless of the school or community, I think it's really important to have clear reference points to the past, clear visuals. And so it's so important to have that vertical timeline, but next to a beautiful learning space where children are constructing, doing. So you walk in and you hear hammers going bang, bang, bang. You hear kids talking about projects they're collaborating on with adults in our community. So yes, having the history alongside the modern approach to teaching and learning for me is critically important.
I love speaking to Luke about history and his love for those who have come before him at St. Andrew's School. He so quickly connected with the context and the richness of his community and really wanted his students to be at the front of the pack, both in terms of their success as students and also the way in which they were guiding the school forward. And he really wanted to build on the success and traditions of the past. In the book, Not Now, Not Ever, Julia Gillard reflects on the 10 years beyond her famous speech in Parliament that has been named the misogyny speech. In one of the essays in that book, there's a line that says, "The history of that speech is written on the walls in Canberra. It's not the same place that it used to be." While I think this could be debatable that it's not the same place it used to be in terms of misogyny, I think something that I really like to reflect on is what's written on the walls. And it's something that I keep coming back to when speaking to our principals. Now, schools love a good poster on the wall, but what's actually being etched into those walls during their time at the school? One person I really look forward to speaking to more about the walls is Jess Chesterfield from Uranley in Brisbane. When we spoke to Jess, she said there was some tension building on her hero's journey. Now, this might be because she's an exceptional meteorologist, as there was a tropical cyclone that ended up closing her school for about a week since we last spoke to her. But it's actually because she's got some major changes coming on the walls in her school that I can't wait to share more with you about. The way Jess looked back in her first reflection was the way in which she came into the role.
So a little bit of an interesting story. So I was at South Rock. I love South Rock. It was no easy decision to leave. And South Rock is a growing school and a new school. And I knew in its future it would be looking for a deputy principal. And I'd been really honest with my leadership team that that's where I would want to be next. I thought that was my next step. And so they had supported me in starting to build criterias. And we thought the next logical step is to look at applying for positions, to get practice in interviewing processes and things like that, so that when the real opportunity came, I was ready for it. And I saw this role come up and I thought, God, that's the dream, but there's no way I'm there yet. However, if I apply for it, I'll know how far off I am. And maybe after I've been a deputy at South Rock, this could be the goal for me one day. So I had seen it in that system and I had seen it as far off and obtainable because I think education tends to have a hierarchy of steps that you should have filled. And a lot of my experiences have been more tangential to that hierarchy. Um, and then they called. And I honestly think it took me quite a while to realize it was real. And I suspect that's why I interviewed well, because a part of me was in such disbelief that it hadn't actually processed and hit how badly I wanted it yet. So I wasn't perhaps as nervous as if I had thought the job was actually on the line. And it was only when I got the second interview and I walked out of the first and I called my sister and I said, I think I might actually be a contender for this job. I actually think I might be a great fit for it. That it started to slowly sink in. And I think, even if I'm being honest, I'm still kind of pinching myself every now and then because although it very much feels like where I should be, there's a part of me that is surprised that I'm here because I thought there were certain steps that had to happen in time. Just even, that could be a decade away from me. Um, and I'm incredibly excited and grateful that I was wrong.
I think what I heard from that is that there's a bravery required from leaders and their supporting structures to look differently at how we actually hire for principals. There's a growing industry of executive search consultancy in education that concerns me a little bit. I don't think there's really capacity to outsource this. What I really think we should be doing is fundamentally changing the role and the way we approach it, not just how we appoint and support afterwards. Hiring different people for the same roles will not cause a long-term change in the statistics that Paul and his team identified. Supporting people more in the same roles will not cause a long-term change either. While we might hear statements like this,
I love it. It's hard. My work-life balance is completely shot, as I knew it would be for the first little bit as I catch my feet. But I genuinely really love it. And I think there is a lot that is the same as being in a classroom.
now that does suggest that hiring the right person and giving them the right support structures is all we need, but I'm not convinced. I'm really excited to spend a full year with each of our principals to really see if it's all it takes, or if there is a fundamental difference to what a principal is at their school that we might be able to share elsewhere.
I guess I came in with my eyes open. I knew that, when you start a role as a principal, it's going to be hard work and it's going to be a very steep learning curve. So I have consciously, I guess, tried to not put too much pressure on myself.
Julie is a very experienced leader who finished our conversation talking about the seasons in her life that had brought her into this principalship. And I've loved speaking with listeners over the last few weeks about the ways in which Julie and Jess have both come into their roles. For Julie, she crafted a recent career trajectory to bring this role to life. While for Jess, she spoke about crafting that journey too, but as she put it, jumping some steps to get there. I wonder how that looks moving forward. When an aspiring leader plans their steps towards principalship, what do we gain and potentially what do we lose with every step that we take on that journey? Clearly, from the name of the podcast, Vacilando, I'm very, very interested and really, really finding more joy in the journey rather than thinking about the destination. And I can't wait to bring more episodes to you this term. My name is Michael Murphy, and this has been episode 5 of Vacilando. In our next episodes, we connect with Dr. Paul Kidson, who talks us through what he sees in the Principal Wellbeing Survey. We spend some time with Jess as she comes up for air after one of the wildest term ones you could ever imagine as a new principal. We hear from Luke as he casts his eyes firmly on the future. And finally, speak again to Julie, who draws our eyes upward to the blue sky vision for her school. Please make sure you rate and share Vacilando with your friends and colleagues, and keep an eye out for some other podcast projects that I'm working on. I'll be bringing the ACEL Middle Leadership Summit to you live from the Gold Coast later this month, along with a special project that I'm really excited to launch called Dear Stardust. I can't wait to share them with you.